Hi, welcome to City at a Glance. I'm your host, David Young, and with us, as always, is our city manager, Darren Atterbury. Darren, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, David.
Today, we're going to talk about something that impacts pretty much everybody in the city, which is traffic construction. And with summertime kicking off, it's definitely a busy time of year for summer construction. So to help us discuss that today, we have Chad Krager, who is our Director of Infrastructure Services, and also Joel Olson, who is our city traffic engineer. Thanks, guys, for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yep, thank you.
So just to kind of kick things off, I'm sure you get some questions about this, Darren, every once in a while. What do you tell folks when people ask about our summer road construction season?
Well, yes, I do get questions about this more than every once in a while. It's a regular topic for people this time of year. And Chad and Joe, I appreciate you guys coming and talking about it. It's if we don't do our job well, it can be a really difficult situation during construction season, but hopefully people will learn, the various efforts that we take to try and minimize the impact. I guess, one of the first things I say, David, is that, it's a long-term investment. So when we're doing construction, typically new facilities or expanded facilities, it's investing in the future and trying to long-term mitigate their various trips and improve the quality of their trips. So that usually doesn't work so well. People go, okay, yeah, great, that's city speak, right? What I typically try and do is just to share with people the effort that goes into mitigating the impacts. I mean, we are disrupting people in their daily lives when we do construction. And so usually it's, here's what we're doing to try and really minimize that impact. And then as of probably the last 2 years, Joe, there's been a second message, and that is that please, when you're out and about and you're in construction zones, please, please, please do not be distracted driver. Because I love the people that I work with. We are our partners, some of the contractors we work with. We know these people and we care about them. And I don't want to visit them in the hospital, and I don't want to go to a funeral. So not to be a downer, but to try and remind people to just be really, really careful when you're driving through construction zones, because the people working in that zone are probably neighbors of yours. So anyway.
Safety is always paramount.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to discuss that some more here. Yeah. Just to kick things off, Chad, could you kind of tell us a little bit, kind of high-level overview of some of the projects that are taking place this summer in Fort Collins?
Sure. We've had some great projects going on. They are large projects, and I'll give us really synopsis in the last couple years. We've had a great partnership with CSU, and the projects that we've done with CSU include the Center and Prospect Underpass for bicyclists and pedestrians. That was completed already. Secondly, we have the Elizabeth and Shields Bicycle and Pedestrian Underpass. Great project that will be done before students come back in August. The third big project that we partner with CSU on is the intersection of Prospect and College. That prospect will be wrapped up in June, and everyone will be happy about that. It's a great project. Beyond those projects that we partnered with CSU on, we have the Lincoln Corridor. That consists of really two main projects, and one is the bridge over the Poudre River. Traveling public will be on it in July, and the entire project till May will be done in the fall. In addition, we also have the College and Foothills Mall Bicycle and Pedestrian Underpass. That project will be wrapped up at the end of June. We also have the Pitkin Low Stress Bicycle Network. And this is great because we have these great bicycle networks, except the difficulty is crossing the arterials or the major roadways. So this project hits those main intersections to make it much safer for bicycles to get from all the way from LeMay to Taft, which is great. In addition to that, we have some intersections that we've wrapped up recently, Timberline and Prospect, as well as Drake and Shields. In addition to that is all of our sidewalks. So, pedestrian connectivity is huge, and so we're continuing to improve that by taking care of gaps in the network.
And that's a lot that's going on, and I know that there's just behind the scenes, there's a lot of work that goes into that as well. And I was hoping, Joe, you could kind of shed a little light on that, just everything that goes into making these different projects possible.
Right, yeah. Just to give you some perspective, in addition to the big ones that Chad mentioned, we get about 2,500 applications for work areas every year that we process through our office. And those can range anywhere from these big capital projects that Chad alluded to, anywhere down to people, having somebody come in and trim the trees in their front yard. And so, really anybody who's working in the street has to come in and get a permit, and then we're doing that coordination work, and it's not just us in traffic operations. That's really, everybody in the city. We meet, regularly with utilities and with engineering and others who are doing work in the streets to try to make sure that we are doing that coordination. It can be challenging in that, there's some things in Fort Collins that really restrict when projects can happen. You always hear the joke that there's winter and then there's construction season, right? And there's some truth to that weather is a big factor in planning projects, that, it's hard to shut things down in the winter or start and stop things like that. So that certainly comes into play. School is a big part of it too. We try to avoid working, when all the schools are in session, and that includes both the PSD, Poudre School District, and also CSU, because there's actually more traffic in town and more impacts when they're here. And so that's part of it as well. There's some other things too, as far as just financial issues with the projects. A lot of the funding for some of these projects is time bound, and so we can't just delay them indefinitely. So they have to happen. And then there's just things like, Chad talked about the river, the bridge over the Poudre, and, stream flows come into play with that too. We have to time that and coordinate that. And so there's a lot that comes into that coordination. And I will say that we do, like I said, meet with all these folks. We meet with utilities outside the city to try to figure out the best way to do this. And a good example of where we did do this would be on Prospect, some of the projects that Chad talked about, and then also some of the others that occurred out further east by I-25. That was all delayed by like a year or two even to account for the Mulberry Bridge project that CDOT was doing over on Mulberry, because we didn't feel like we could have both Mulberry and Prospect all, blocked up at the same time. And so that, that's an example of that coordination that's going on.
Yeah. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of different things taking place at once, and then a lot of coordination to make that all possible so that people can still live their lives and maneuver and get around during this time.
Yeah.
Can you guys talk a little bit about how people can get information for these different projects if they want to go out and get around town, what the best way to learn about that is, and then how to kind of traverse those areas?
Yeah, so the city's website is a good place to start, fcgov.com. Right on the front page, there's always press releases at the bottom of the page. In fact, the top press release right now is about the College and Prospect project and what's going on there. That'd be a good place to start. The city also, if you go fcgov.com/fctrip, it'll take you to a map that's full of information about all the different projects that are going on, plus others that are planned in the future. And then lastly, we try to put the variable message boards. Everybody, I think there's sometimes fatigue with the variable message boards. There's so many of them out and about. But as you're going by, or when we're planning a big project, we try to get those out several days in advance so that people are at least notified that their normal route may be blocked here shortly. And so I know it's hard to read them all the time, but if people do try to read those, that can be helpful as well.
Definitely. Chad, Darren, maybe you could speak a little bit to kind of a longer term, once these projects start to wrap up and are completed, what folks can expect here in Fort Collins and what the future of Fort Collins will look like with these projects in place.
Sure. So these projects, once they're complete, the good thing is they will be a great benefit to the community. In general, these projects address three things, and that is to improve safety, and that's to all modes of transportation, bicycles, pedestrians, and vehicles. Two is to really increase the efficiency, and that means by completing the bicycle and pedestrian network to reducing congestion. And lastly, it's how do we enhance the environment of Fort Collins? And we do that with our great landscaping and artistic elements. Good example of us actually looking at what the effects of a project are is the Timberline and Horsetooth intersection. From a safety impact perspective, we went from 41 crashes per year. When the project was complete, that's down at 26. That's a huge increase for safety. On top of that, we had a reduction in congestion during rush hour by 40% in delay. That improves really the life of all people in Fort Collins. And so, our projects in general hit those three things in order to improve and ensure the future of our transportation network.
I guess the only thing I would add is slightly off topic, David, and that is we haven't talked about the streets, the pavement overlay projects and construction that's going on in neighborhoods and on collectors and some arterials. That too has an impact on people, and so we've talked about new projects and expanded projects and or redesigned But as Larry Schneider and the streets folks are out, doing work on neighborhood streets and again throughout the city, they're having an impact. But your question, what triggered that thought is, if we are making investments in maintenance investments in the roadway or on the whatever the facility is, we're going to minimize our long-term costs. If we defer maintenance, we're going to have higher costs in replacing that facility someday out in the future. And so I think about, a lot of our maintenance efforts, they're really future-oriented. I mean, we talk a lot about new connections and we talk about multimodalism, but just basic investments in our existing infrastructure, that's going to save us money 10, 20, 30 years out. So just wanted to share that work that's going on as well. And then, as Joe mentioned, fcgov.com is always a great place for information. And I think at any point too, and I'll just share this, Joe, because I hear from citizens who come and visit your shop and they see what you're doing from a traffic operations standpoint, and they see the facilities and investments we've made. I want to encourage people, sort of what's become sort of a non-traditional way is to come in and visit with our engineering staff or visit with our traffic operations staff. And you can always email, you can always call, you can always go online for updates. And but also I'm just so impressed with the work that Joe and Chad's been here a few weeks, by the way. I'm already, your knowledge of the improvement. Weren't you impressed, Joe, when he started rattling off all the projects? So good work on that. But man, you have an incredible department of people, and so do you, Joe. And I just, if someone's interested in this topic, reach out to Joe or to Chad and see if you can get a few minutes to talk with them. And I think what you're going to find is a very, very capable, dedicated staff teams that are working on these things and constantly trying to leverage our partnerships with CSU and Poudre School District and the state and so forth. So.
And I can attest to that. I've toured Joe's shop, and he's got a pretty cool command center in there that he enjoys showing off. So yeah, for anybody interested, definitely
absolutely.
But
check
you're
it out.
thinking you don't want 165,000 people showing up, though, do you?
Chad
may, because he's new and.
I've been there. It's very, very cool.
If we could hold all 165,000,
Yeah.
I would say let's have them all.
Yeah.
Because it's, I think it's good stuff, and most people that come in are, find it interesting. So.
Good.
Yeah. A moment ago, Darren, you alluded to safety, and safety is certainly one of the main priorities and values of the city. I just wanted to ask you guys, could you talk a little bit about some of the safety measures in place for our crews and kind of the cone zone, and talk directly to viewers as they kind of traverse these areas this summer, what they can do to remain safe?
Right, yeah, I can take that one, early start. When I talk about project planning, really, we're talking about all those different things with weather and everything else. Really, safety is the first thing that we think about when we're planning projects and how we're going to do them. And what that might end up meaning is, whether we're deciding whether we're just going to do something under traffic with lane closures or do a full closure to try to protect, workers and minimize impacts to the traveling public too. And it's interesting because that's really kind of a case-by-case thing. Sometimes it makes sense to do it one way, sometimes it's others. And when we're talking about safety, it's not just, it's both the workers and the motorists. And a lot of times what we'll see with a closure is that, it'll have a good impact right at the spot, but then we'll see a bunch of accidents where all the traffic's been detoured to. And so, again, we're always trying to balance those things and trying to figure out on a case-by-case the best way to do that.
Definitely. And I know that cone zones apply not just to motorists, but pedestrians and bicycles as well. That's something that I think some people may overlook when they're riding or walking. They'll kind of wander into those work zone areas. So just kind of a reminder on that as well.
Yeah, and for the second part of your question, and to build on what Darren said earlier, we really are asking for cooperation from people. And believe me, we know how frustrating it can be to be surprised by a big backup somewhere that you weren't expecting, and it can be so frustrating. But a lot of the incidents that we see in work zones are really kind of road ragey type of things where people get frustrated and do dumb things. And so, and the distraction is also part of that. People aren't paying attention. So, anything we can do to ask for cooperation from people traveling around, including bicyclists and pedestrians who we do see, kind of going by barricades because it's easier for them to do that. But it's not really safe necessarily to be in those work zones. And so, cooperation from everybody, and then also just, we appreciate everybody's patience as they're going through, because we do know that there's a big impact to people as they're trying to get about town.
Definitely. So one of the biggest things in those areas is definitely just slow, kind of take it easy, slow, take your time, and get there a little bit later, but everybody gets there safe and alive, for sure. So looking forward beyond summer of 2017, can you guys speak to the future a little bit for road construction in Fort Collins and what people can expect? I know that these are long-term plans that are, as you said, and there's a lot of work that goes into this for the future as well as the present.
I could talk about some of the large CIP projects. We have some bridges. One of the things that we do is look at our bridges annually. And so some of the bridges coming up will be Drake west of Red Wing is due for replacement in 2018, as well as the Riverside Bridge that really is access to Epic, so just north of Epic there. And that will also improve the Spring Creek Trail. In addition, we have some other projects such as the Suniga improvement, which is great because there's not a lot of impacts to public because it's a new project from College all the way over to Old Town North. In addition, we have more sidewalk improvements, and also we're working with CDOT on the exciting I-25 and Prospect Interchange. We hope to begin construction, or they'll begin construction with our partnership in 2018. So there's a lot of things that we're working on coming up in 2018 that we're excited about.
Thank you, Chad. With that in mind, is there anything else that you can think of that you'd like to add, Darren, on this topic?
No, I guess I'd just reiterate that, Joe, I appreciate the way that you've always had empathy around some of the impacts that we've had on motorists and pedestrians and cyclists, as you've emphasized as well, Chad, and I appreciate that. And I think our coworkers feel the same way, and I think contractors as well. We're constantly trying to improve so that we minimize the impact. And in a growing community like Fort Collins is, and one that places a high value on maintenance of existing facilities, that means we're going to have impacts. And so I think it's helpful to talk about this topic, David, because it is on people's minds and they do care about it. But again, I think it's the big story is really about a community that's trying to improve, trying to get better, trying to. We know that the one of two top issues on the minds of people in this community is traffic, and so that's why we're talking about it today. And again, I guess I would just finish up with an absolute request to be safe when you're driving throughout Fort Collins and riding bikes or walking, but particularly careful going through these construction zones.
Thank you, everybody, for joining me today. I appreciate you giving us some insight into this interesting topic that everybody deals with here in Fort Collins. As you drive around this summer, hopefully you will have a little bit better understanding of why those construction zones are in place and that you'll be able to slow down and be safe as you go through them. Thank you for joining us this time on City at a Glance.